Dark Phoenix. Is it dark or is it good? Which is better? X3 The Last Stand or Dark Phoenix? We're going to talk about that in a full spoiler-filled review, plus our reactions to Marvel's Avengers, the video game trailer that just dropped at E3. Are we excited about it? What do we think of the looks in it? We're going to dissect that trailer, plus first reactions to Jessica Jones Season 3. Don't worry, no spoilers for Jessica Jones, but so much to talk about today on Marvel Movie News.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk, we talk movies. And now, here's Popcorn Talk's Marvel Movie News.
Good afternoon to you, our merry Marvelites. Welcome back to Marvel Movie News. We're coming to you live from the Danger Room. I wrote it down and then I forgot what I'd written down. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. We are going to be talking about Dark Phoenix. All spoilers from here on out for Dark Phoenix. Just fair warning to anybody who's worried, I guess, a week later about getting that movie spoiled. But we want to make sure that you're aware. So we're going to talk about that. Jessica Jones' first feelings. I think we've seen just the first episode so far. No spoilers on that, but what are our first impressions? Avengers video game trailer. So there's a bunch of other stuff too. Mainly Dark Phoenix we got to talk about. I'm Zach Wilson. Got to remember who we are. That's Xia Anderson.
That's me.
And I'm Christian Bladt. Hi.
One thing we want to make sure that you guys are aware of, you may have heard us tease on last week's Marvel Movie News or on Sunday during Marvel TV Weekly. Chris Claremont, unfortunately, he's a busy guy. He's an important guy. He's got a lot of stuff going on. There's this other show coming out. It's on FX. It's a little popular.
Yeah, he ditched us for the Legion premiere.
People
can't blame him for that.
Can't blame him for that.
Him at all.
But we are working on rescheduling that, right?
Yes. Yeah, it will definitely be rescheduled. Just right now, I'm not sure when, and we're still in the process of that.
And as soon as we know more about when that's going to be rescheduled for, we will make sure to let you guys know. And we're still going to talk about Dark Phoenix. Talk hopefully about the Legion premiere that's coming next week. Is that already
I think
next
it's
week?
actually a week from Monday.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I was originally thought it was this Monday coming up. I think it's the 24th. So,
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, either way, lots of cool stuff to talk to Chris about once we get a chance to sit down with him. But stick around for that. But why don't we talk about Dark Phoenix in the meantime? So much to dissect here. I just want to start out with your first guttural reactions, and chat. I also want to hear from you guys, because I want to know what you guys thought of this movie. This is one of the most movies where I especially wanted to know what other people thought. When you first left the theater, what were your first reactions to Dark Phoenix?
So I had two things. I had literally just finished the Dark Phoenix saga right before I went to the theater, maybe an hour or two before I went to go watch the movie. So it's hard because I was like, oh, this is such a cool story that they could tell. But I also was going into it with expectations that were so ridiculously low because of what people were saying. Just the Rotten Tomato score, which is 23%, I think, at that point. I don't know if it's changed since then. So I went in with really, really low expectations, but having just read it, so part of me was like, oh, this was actually really cool. It was not anywhere near as bad as I thought it was going to be. There were things I liked. I mean, Zach, you're right. Michael Fassbender, on just anytime he's in a scene, you're just like, oh, this is so great. And so there was those parts of it, but I feel like it was a bit of a letdown because they really missed an opportunity, goodness gracious, that's a word, to tell a really cool story. So it's like they kind of told the story, but they didn't. I feel like there could have been, it doesn't have to be exactly comic book accurate, but you could have used elements of it more, I think, than they did. So that part was disappointing, but not terrible. Definitely not as bad as I thought.
Christian, what did you think? You and I saw it together, so I heard a little bit of your reaction.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about it last week. We talked about it in the spoiler-free way. But I generally like the X-Men movies. I did like this one just on its merits. It was flawed, certainly, but I'm always willing to grade the X-Men on a bit of a curve because I care so much about those characters. I care about them more than most of the Avengers characters. Just those movies, sure, I admit those movies are better, but I've just cared about them for so long that I kind of want them to be better than maybe sometimes they are. But I didn't dislike this movie. There are definitely a few eye rolls, a couple of like, shifting in my seat, waiting for something else to happen. But first and foremost, I was excited because Nightcrawler is one of my favorite X-Men, and he gets a lot of screen time in this movie. Finally, we get to see Nightcrawler. So even if I hated everything else, I still would have been like, it was pretty good because we got a lot of Nightcrawler.
This was like swashbuckling Nightcrawler too.
That's
like,
a Nightcrawler I love.
Stab someone through the neck with his tail. That was awesome.
That was cool. That was super cool.
I was like, all right, I'm into this.
So yeah. So when I first left the theater, I was like, that was good. Like that wasn't great. That was good. That was my base reaction, was like, that was fine.
Yeah.
It was more like, yeah, okay, that was
It was a movie we watched.
Yeah, that was a movie. But I'm really curious if your reaction has changed since you saw it, because this is one of those movies that, like, once I got out of it, I was like, yeah, that was good. It wasn't great, but the more time I've spent like thinking about it, and this is, I'll admit, partially that like the danger of being like a critic. Like, we have a show and we have to talk about it, and I love talking about it, but when you have to talk about it, you have to sometimes overthink things, because you have to stop and be like, okay, so what did I think of this, what did I think of that? And the more time I spent thinking about it, the less I liked it, the more flaws I found, the more like the good stuff like sort of fell to the wayside for the stuff I didn't like.
Well, because you're looking at it with a more critical eye. That always tends to happen.
Well, but like, and I don't want to have to compare it to Endgame because that's not fair, except that they sort of, that was one of my my things, is like, I felt like they think it was Endgame for
like
the X-Men universe,
version, yeah,
but it wasn't. And that thought process of like, they treated it like it was their big finale as opposed to the second movie in for a lot of these characters. That's where it fell through for me as I started to think about it. But so did you guys think that has your opinion changed over the last week since you saw it?
Yeah, I agree. The more you think about it, the more I'm like, oh, I didn't like this. I didn't like this. I think the more highlights for me were just a lot of the action scenes and just a lot of the acting, because I thought that the acting is great. Then you start thinking about things that really bother you, like, for example, Mystique's makeup. What was that? Like, what are we doing here? We're just pretending like the Mystique that was in the last movie and the previous movies is not the Mystique anymore, and now she's more human. Like, I don't understand what they were going for. The hair was awful. And also, Quicksilver in, like, one scene? Thanks a lot, guys. So that was disappointing, just right off the bat. But
Christian got his Nightcrawler, and Xia didn't get her Quicksilver.
No Quicksilver.
They traded amounts of screen time.
And for Raven, remember, she's a shapeshifter, so perhaps she shapeshifts into a less good-looking version of herself.
So yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
Just
that's
be
probably
the discount version of yourself. Great.
Right, exactly.
Look, what does Raven know about makeup? She could just do whatever she wants.
Yeah,
she doesn't
true.
have to. Maybe she's trying something. This is the 90s, Zia, right? This takes place in the 90s.
1992, yeah.
They like kind of show it, but not really.
Not really. Yeah, you don't get the 90s
No, like
feel at all.
Captain Marvel, you knew it was the 90s mostly
Yeah.
from the 90s music. This, it's only the 90s because they told you it was the 90s. You don't see any. There's just see cars that look like they're from the 90s. There's nothing,
Yeah.
Clothes, nada.
But in answer to your question, I don't think that much differently about it. I'm more inclined to, like, I do want to watch it again, and I think a second viewing would be more critical.
Yeah.
So if I have the time to watch it again, I think that's when I might, start picking apart the things that I didn't like.
But look, it's not a bad watch. I don't think it deserved the 23% it got on Rotten Tomatoes, where everybody was like, it's so terrible. Like, I think you can go watch it and enjoy it. Like,
I agree with that. That's the thing. It is like, I enjoyed the action sequences. I think clearly whoever was doing fight choreography or Simon Kinberg watches the Netflix shows, because he designed the big final battle to be in basically a big hallway.
that's a good point. I didn't think about that.
And now here's the thing. It doesn't compare to the Netflix hallway fight sequences,
No.
but as far as mutant fight sequences, I enjoyed the heck out of it. I thought it was fun. I thought it used power. I think so. As far as stuff that we liked, I thought that the fight sequences and a lot of the ways that they use powers for like big actiony and even dramatic moments were really cool. The moment where Jean and Magneto are like fighting psychically to control the helicopter, that was awesome, because that's something you always think about in comics is like, what if you had to, like, what if it's two people with powers that even if they're not identical, like had to try to do opposite things? What, like, would the helicopter break in half? Would it, what, like, so we got to see that.
Yeah,
I enjoyed that. What were some things that you guys really liked about the movie?
Well, it's good that you mentioned the fight sequences, because that is one of the, and very specifically the way that powers that we've seen on the big screen for 20 years, like Magneto's, they're still able to find some inventive ways. Like when he made the train car collapse in on itself with everybody in it, I was like, oh, that's a little different than something we've seen before. So I thought all that stuff was good. I care about these characters, and I think that Sophie Turner did a great job conveying a Jean Grey who is conflicted with this power she has, not knowing how to handle it, and obviously very upset with, you know, what she's done to her friend. I bought her as someone who's being inhabited by an alien being that has immense power. So I really thought everybody was great. Cyclops is not my favorite, I'm just gonna say, but I liked everybody else.
I don't mind him. Yeah. I agree. I was just gonna say I agree with that a lot. I really like also the way they showed how much power she has, especially when she meets Magneto and she's crushing him with his helmet. And then she just breaks it apart easily. Like, she's basically just toying with him. Yeah. I like the way that they showed that of like, look, I could crush you like a tiny bug, but I'm not gonna. Now get the hell out of here. I enjoyed the way they did that. That was good. Yeah.
And as you said, like Michael Fassbender, just like every scene that he's in is elevated.
So
and like that's the thing. I don't think that Sophie Turner did a bad job. I think she's great in that role. I wish she just had another movie in between. I wish that she had more time to develop this character, and we're going to talk about it a little bit when we do Last Stand versus Dark Phoenix. But that's one of the big flaws for me, is that Dark Phoenix, or rather X3, The Last Stand, had chance to develop Famke Janssen as Jean Grey to the point where you cared about not just the character of Jean Grey, but this version of Jean Grey. And so, Apocalypse was such a lackluster story, especially, and she was just a kind of background in that one,
very much,
that you didn't have time to attach to her. And Sophie Turner did a great job with the stuff that she was given. But, and this sort of, I think, rings to a lot of Fox's X-Men strategy. I don't know if you guys saw this. Matthew Vaughn was talking about how when he wrote First Class and then Days of Future Past, he originally had had 3 movies planned. Days of Future Past was supposed to be the 3rd one, not the 2nd of this like soft reboot of the X-Men franchise. There was he had planned a 70s Wolverine movie.
God, I would have loved that.
That he wanted to cast Tom Hardy in to bring a young Wolverine in. Now, how that you're breaking timelines even further, but
really
look,
thinking
it's
about
not important. Don't. Basically, when it comes to X-Men timelines, don't think about it. Like they clearly didn't try to make it make sense. They just made the next movie and moved forward. Which can be fine if you just if you're not a nerd and you need to micro dissect everything and need it to line up and you have charts and graphs and books full of how did this work?
And then you're like, oh,
it didn't work. They just didn't think about it. Fox. Anyway.
Clearly you've never done this before.
But what Matthew Vaughn said he had planned is he was going to do, it was X-Men First Class, and then it was supposed to be this young Wolverine movie, and then once you've been inhabiting in this world, and I'm sure that there would be other X-Men that would have popped up in that timeline, you might have had Magneto and Xavier in the McAvoy and Fassbender versions integrated into that story. Then you get X-Men Days of Future Past as the 3rd in a trilogy where, okay, so now everything's going crazy. And then he actually talked about he thought that that Apocalypse was a step back from stakes-wise. And that makes a lot of sense when you think about how we received Apocalypse. The last it's the entire universe and every X-Men and mutant is going to be destroyed but we saved the day. Well, now this guy's coming along to take over the world, and not just not all of time is at stake, and it's just like it's a de-heightening.
Yeah, I actually agree. That's a good point.
And he had said that he almost wanted Apocalypse to happen before Days of Future Past if they flipped him, and that actually also makes sense to me. That could have worked if they had reversed the order.
Yeah, I just think the stakes of Days of Future Past should be higher, and yeah, I think that if that was the order, and whatever that middle movie would have been too, I think it all would have worked. It would have worked out really well that way. But that's not what we got.
Yeah, that's not what we got. And there were a lot of changes that came up. What's his name? Ty Sheridan?
Ty Sheridan,
That's
yeah.
Cyclops. Yeah.
Cyclops was talking about, and he was the one who spilled the beans about so we talked a little about it a little bit last week, but they changed a lot of the ending of Dark Phoenix. They had to do rewrites based on some changes from, quote, another Marvel movie that came, or another superhero movie that came out.
That we don't know what that is.
Well, now we do.
We do, yeah.
Yeah. It was one as suspected. It was absolutely Captain Marvel, and if you watch Dark Phoenix, this makes all the sense. They were the Dabari.
Dabari, yeah.
Sorry.
We're not supposed to come from a one-panel reference in the Dark Phoenix comics, which is where those characters come from. But they were supposed to be Skrulls, who do feature in the Dark Phoenix comics.
They do,
Yes.
yeah,
And
and
would
play
have-
a part.
Yeah, and
Sorry.
would have made sense in this movie if those characters were Skrulls. You're like, okay, sure. And I think that what's not in the movie, I think, is this planned idea of the Skrulls. Is according to Ty Sheridan, the Skrulls were going to have infiltrated our government, and all of this. And I'm like, oh, that's a way better movie. And I think, I guess, well, judging from the box office, they probably are like, oh, it would have been all right if we had an ending like Captain Marvel's. That would have been okay.
Well,
Yeah.
that's I think where Dark Phoenix clearly suffered was they set out to make a certain thing, and then basically way too late in the game got some forced changes from outside. This was like, oh, somebody beat us to this story, and even though they had the technical rights to do it, because both companies had rights to the Skrulls, they didn't want to just do the same thing, and so they changed course. They also, Simon Kinberg was talking about, this was supposed to be this is supposed to be a 2-part movie. It was supposed to be like Dark Phoenix Part 1 and Dark Phoenix Part 2. You can debate, and we could debate forever about whether you like 2-part movies or not. Obviously, we've seen that done to some success in certain franchises and to failure in others. Endgame and Infinity War is basically a 2-part movie, and it works in that sense. But then you have movies like Harry Potter and Deathly Hallows, where it just feels like you split a movie into 2.
Personally, I didn't mind that. I think, and this is coming from just like a ridiculous Harry Potter fan. I think you needed to do that, because if you tried to make it one, no way.
I don't think that you're wrong. You're not wrong. You needed the space to tell that story, and maybe you did for Dark Phoenix, but we won't know. Clearly, the fact that this movie felt rushed is part of that. They found out in pre-production that they were losing their second movie, so they had to go back to back into the script, rework things and change things and speed everything up,
Right.
To make it fit into a single movie. Partially because I'm sure they knew that the Fox merger, the Fox buyout was coming, and they knew this was going to be the last one, so they had to speed things up. But that's part of why the movie feels a little bit disjointed. Look, everyone freaks out when they hear the words rewrites or reshoots. Those are normal. Those happen all the time. It's when you have giant companies in motion instituting changes. That's when you're have these things. Rewrites are absolutely normal.
Well, yeah, I think it's different as rewrites of being like, you know what, we don't like this here, let's put this here. Like, it just works better this way, as opposed to, oh crap, we got to remake kind of the whole idea of this movie, and we got to change a lot. Then that's a completely different story.
I've seen so many stories this week of people like freaking out about like things that are just part of making movies. Like Sophie Turner was talking about, oh yeah, we were rewriting the script on set all the time, and everyone's like, what? Oh my god. You know what other movie was constantly writing and rewriting the script on set every day, and literally every day? Iron Man. The first Iron Man wasn't even done with the script when they started filming.
That's amazing.
If you read like what Jon Favreau was talking, and I think who was it that was talking about? Jeff Bridges was talking about it. When he was like, he would just show up and they'd be like new pages every day.
And most of our favorite beloved TV shows work that way too. You know, like the showrunner's like, okay, what are we shooting tomorrow? That's what I'm rewriting. You know, so it happens a lot. I mean, it has a sound of like, oh my God, they rewrote it. And reshoots. Look, there are definitely examples where reshoots don't necessarily make a movie better, but in general, most movies that we like have some degree of reshoots. Yeah. You know, so and it usually, I would bet, makes a movie better to have taken a little time for reshoots.
Usually.
Usually.
They did that with Rogue One too. I was just gonna say, and I love that movie.
Rogue One had heavy rewrites.
Right.
That was like they got the cut and said, "Oh, this isn't the direction we wanted. We're changing things." Right. But like every movie, Endgame had reshoots. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Literally any movie you can think of went into post, ended main production, went into post, said, "Oh, this scene needs an extra shot here, or we need an extra scene here. Drop this scene." There's a reason you have deleted scenes. Is because once you write it, shoot it, and put it together, you're like, that didn't work the way I imagined it. Let's scrap it.
Just scrap it. It sucks.
Like we found something. We had a better idea. Mm-hmm. And when you have a big budget movie, you have the money to go make those ideas happen. So let's talk about this. Is the controversial topic that I want to get into. Anything good from the chat?
There's a general feeling, and something we actually haven't touched on, is that Jessica Chastain was wasted, and I don't think they mean drunk. They mean that she was wasted in this. You know, she's a great actress. She did what she could with what was given to her, and she wasn't given much to work with.
Yes, I 100% agree with that.
I think she could have just not been in the movie, and I wouldn't have noticed. Like, it would have been fine.
Well, that was the thing. By taking by making it not the Skrulls, and if there was like this government conspiracy going on in the background and all of that, you took away all the stakes. Like they didn't give us any of the background on the Dabari or like why they were there. We knew that the Phoenix Force had done something bad to them vaguely, but that was really it. We didn't go to the planet. We didn't see them get... So, like, if the backstory was the Phoenix Force destroyed our planet, so we're going to take it and use that force to take over a new planet to rebuild our home world. If that's the story, they didn't do a great job. They talked about it. They told us that that's what happened. They never showed us.
It felt like such a background thing, too. Like, it felt like you're like, okay, but I kind of don't care. Like, even though that's like a horrible thing, you're like... You didn't make me feel anything.
But that's the thing. It's basically, if you could, like, I almost wish we could have started the movie seeing their homeworld destroyed.
Yeah, no,
that would have
really no, but it would have added more weight, and you would have cared more about their cause. And you're like, okay, I get it, I understand what's happening here. Instead of it just being like, who are they, and where are they coming from,
and why exactly do they want? Why are they so interested in the Phoenix Force? You know, and I think that if we would have cared a lot about them, and been at least a little sympathetic. If it's like, well, look what happened to their homeworld. Yeah, that would have been a great way to start it.
I mean, it's like the Skrulls in Captain Marvel.
Yeah,
where like, they did bad things, but we cared about them because we saw their plight. We got to see the humanity side of them.
Yeah. And you hear more about the backstory, and you're like, oh, I get it. And then you get someone like Ben Mendelsohn, who's just great to portray it, and you're like,
and Jessica Chastain, she did the best she could with what she had, and she did a great job. Like her performances in the scenes that she had were great. There's just not a lot there for us to connect to. Even a great performance can't give you backstory without it being in the script.
Right.
So here, that is actually a perfect transition into the discussion of Dark Phoenix, the most recent attempt to adapt the Dark Phoenix saga from the comics, versus the first attempt on the big screen to adapt the Dark Phoenix saga, which is X-Men 3: The Last Stand. And Christian and I, in like our little group text chain where Xia like found her phone later and was like, "What the?"
No, I was at work. There's no way I can be on my phone at work.
That's what I mean. You found it later, and you were like, 30 messages.
No, I did. I looked at it and I was like, "Huh?"
Like,
I read through them really quick, and I was like, "Okay."
What were the boys nerd fighting about? And you're like, "Oh, X-Men makes sense."
Christian and I were having a debate about, because I went and rewatched X-Men 3: The Last Stand. And at the end of it, and I'm not saying that I think that it is a good movie per se, But I think that as a movie, it is better than Dark Phoenix. Christian disagrees.
I do.
Xia hasn't said her view up point on it yet. But let's have a little debate here. Christian, I'm going to let you go first on this one.
I
Being a
rewatched
gentleman.
it about 5 years ago because leading up to Days of Future Past, I watched all of them. And I found that there was more in X-Men Origins Wolverine that I didn't hate, namely Liev Schreiber. This movie, I think I liked less rewatching it. And it's very simple what I didn't like about it. You took the greatest comic book story of all time, according to me, and made it boring. It is so dull. Jean, Famke Janssen, I liked in the first two. It's like she's sleepwalking through this movie, and not only that, they crammed this other storyline into it. I'm like, you had enough with Dark Phoenix. You put a bad storyline with the Cure in there, and and then we got a bad Angel. I forget that actor's name. He's actually a good actor. I just didn't like him in that. And
he's only in it for 3 scenes.
Right, exactly. So I just really found that they just made it dull and uninteresting. The one thing that's better is that Wolverine's in it, and he should be a part of the story, not this version of the Dark Phoenix that we just got now because of a lot of age inappropriateness there. But that's, I'd say, the one thing for it. It's my least favorite X-Men movie, but I also don't even hate it. It's just there's so much with it that like this Dark Phoenix, I'm like, oh, there's so many missed opportunities. So I graded this Dark Phoenix on a curve because to me it's just better than that one, and that for me isn't really saying that much.
Yeah. So here's the thing that I want to clarify. X-Men 3, I am not saying is a good adaptation of Dark Phoenix in any way, because it's just not. It basically took the idea of a bad, very overpowered Jean Grey and dropped everything else from Dark Phoenix.
Oh, so, I wouldn't even know you were trying to tell a Dark Phoenix story with that movie, honestly.
It's just evil Jean Grey. And so, that, to me, I basically put that aside because that was I'm just looking at it as okay, what did I see on screen, not what version of the comic did I want to see. And what it came down to for me was these two movies, which one was I more invested in the stakes of? And to me, X-Men 3 had higher stakes because you had a weaponized Cure, which for whatever you can say it's shoehorned into the Dark Phoenix story. It is scarier. It's a scarier thing for the people, the characters that we've invested in, that we care about, that they could just get shot with a needle and power's gone like that.
Yeah, I mean, and that happens to Storm in the comics in Uncanny X-Men 185. They're determined to shoot Rogue, and they miss, and they shoot Storm. And for a long time, she doesn't have powers. So I was actually glad they were. I think that should have been a different movie. I just don't know that Brett Ratner was going to make an X-Men movie that I like. And sorry, in the chat, Carlito Lee likes this movie better, but he reminds me of something that did bother me. Cyclops dies almost off screen. You see him die, but I'm like, wait, did he die? Cyclops, are you dead? And then the movie ends. I'm like, I guess he stayed dead, because I remember watching it in the theater, and I didn't know he died, and I should have known that one of the founding members of the X-Men died in the movie. So anyway, that just reminded me of one of my major problems. With the movie.
Another reason that you didn't like it. Nice.
Yeah, I mean, look, so Dark Phoenix, the action sequences are better. I think that the stuff they did with Genosha was really cool. But I would love to see a movie about Genosha. It's the same thing they did in Apocalypse, and maybe it's just Fassbender. But those little moments, those emotional moments between characters, and what they're trying to do is way more fascinating to me than big world-ending stuff. And so, Phoenix Falls Away is barely a part of The Last Stand. It almost feels like Venom in Spider-Man 3, where but it's the same thing where I feel like that somebody went in and pitched, this is the movie I want to make. Sam Raimi went in for Spider-Man 3. He's I want to make a Sandman movie, and I want the Harry Osborn to take up the Green Goblin. That's the 2-part story that I want to tell here. And they're like, yeah, but everyone wants Venom. You're gonna do Venom, right? He's like, but I don't even like Venom. Like, do I have to? And they're like, you got to do Venom. Like, but can I?
Doesn't fit in with the story.
Can I cast somebody who's dark and pretty? Nope, that kid from that '70s show. He's gonna be Venom. Who I like a lot, by the way.
But like, he went in, he wanted to do this movie, and they made him put Venom in. And I feel like X-Men 3, they wanted to do the movie about the cure.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, but Famke Janssen's got to be in it. Like, you got to bring her back and do Dark Phoenix. They're like, but we were gonna do this cure thing because that's like emotionally like the right stakes to do at this point, and it makes sense for the world. And they're like, yeah, but Dark Phoenix. And then they're like, well, okay, and whoop, there she goes. But the dynamics of that, the world, here's what it comes down to for me. The villains were scarier in The Last Stand because the villains were the government, as opposed to the Dabari,
right?
Who I didn't like. They were more powerful, but I didn't care about their story, so they didn't feel scary.
And also, they didn't feel scary to me because there weren't that many of them. Like, there were, but there weren't. Like, if whoever showed up at the train, it seems like a lot of their race got killed, and they just had like a few of them there trying to go there and start a new life and take over Earth and whatever. But it didn't seem to like affect anyone else outside of the X-Men. So it didn't feel like, oh, it was this big world threat. It's just, here's a few Dabari that we have to defeat, and we will, no problem.
I mean, so here's the question that I have for you guys. Like, we could debate about this movie. There's no answer. It's just their movies, their opinions.
Well, it's opinion, yeah.
Yeah.
Really opinion based.
Wait, but Xia, do you have a strong opinion as to one being better than the other? Because we did our thing, and I assume you haven't seen it in a while. But
I haven't seen it in a while, so it would be I would have to rewatch it. At the time watching it, I was really young, so I didn't have like the same problems that I have with it now. It's like, it's different. It's a whole different experience. But I like this Dark Phoenix better, I think. I think just as far as like overall movies go, it's a little better.
That's fine. And like, that's the thing. Like, we all have opinions.
Yeah.
I disagree.
You're wrong and stupid, but we all have opinions. I'm just kidding.
Here's what I'll say for my final thing on Last Stand, which is favorable. I don't like the Jean Grey Wolverine relationship, just period. I've never liked it. But there's great scenes with them in The Last Stand. I actually think that that's really well done.
That's a great point.
It still makes me not like this idea that they were ever, it's a total retcon thing that I don't like. But it was well handled in that, and I think that they're very good together in some of those scenes.
I always liked it in the 90s
You
cartoon.
would. You like the bad boy.
I did, yeah. Well, because he loved her.
So here's my question. Is this a fitting farewell for the Fox X-Men universe?
No.
Yeah, Days of Future
a
Past.
bummer.
Go watch the road cut of Days of Future Past.
That's next on my list. I really want to watch that.
If you haven't, you get more new stuff, and you get both versions of these characters. That is like the true finale. Yes, there were two, maybe three other movies after it, depending on what happens with New Mutants.
Yeah.
But to me, Days of Future Past will always be like the grand finale endgame movie of the Foxmen. The Foxmen universe.
The Foxmen. I liked things about Apocalypse, and obviously I like things about this movie. But if there hadn't been anything after Days of Future Past, what a great ending that would have been. You know?
It's all right. We can. It's headcanon, you guys.
Yeah, right.
So real quick, and then because I do want to have time to talk about the other stuff that happened this week. What do you guys want to see now from an MCU X-Men? And I'll let you guys think about that for a minute because I'm hard transitioning. And so here's the thing that I've been thinking about that I think that Disney should do with the X-Men. That I don't know if they will. But I think they should consider the next adaptation, the next live-action adaptation of the X-Men should be a TV show. Not The Gifted, not like B versions of the characters that we've gotten used to. I mean, you should do a Disney Plus series in the MCU about whether it's about the school and you're doing like basically Buffy with just all X-Men or something like that. A cast of this size with the emotional stakes that the X-Men get, I think is best served with 8 hours as opposed to 2. I think that you would get a better and more unique version. You wouldn't just feel like you're redoing the X-Men universe again for the second time in a decade, or 2 decades, I guess. Like the third version in 2 decades. Yeah. A TV series would feel different and new.
I don't hate that idea at all, actually. That's not a bad idea. Just because you're right, you get, and also I feel like every character would get more screen time because it's such a huge cast. I mean, that makes perfect sense. And, you know, I got no Quicksilver in this movie, so cool. But maybe you could have, you know, where you're telling stories and you see each character gets more time in the spotlight. I would like that. That would actually be really cool. Mostly what I just want to see from the Disney X-Men is just good casting. They haven't ever disappointed me with casting before, so I don't think it's going to be an issue. But good casting and the right tone, I think, is another thing, because X-Men just has kind of it has a slightly darker tone, and I don't need it to be anything like rated R or anything crazy like that, because that, you know, the other movies weren't, and that was fine. But it needs to have that slightly more real, slightly more gritty tone that I hope that they'll kind of put into it.
Well, it's a civil rights story.
Exactly.
At the core of X-Men, it's a civil rights story. And I was thinking about this, and I actually feel like you could go even harder on the analogy that they're making. Like, look, when you recast Magneto if you're casting him into the MCU, you kind of have to. And as somebody who's Jewish, and I love that Magneto tells a Jewish character's story, and I hate to lose that, but the timeline doesn't work for him to have been a prisoner in World War II and be even anything other than 100 years old.
Yeah,
that's true.
In modern day MCU, and we don't need to freeze a character. But I think you get a lot of stories out of Magneto and Charles Xavier being on very close to a Malcolm X, Martin Luther King story if you cast African American actors in both roles and put them into the civil rights movement in the 1960s. Have them in the South during that time, and that's where Magneto like hits her. It's a different story.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's
I acknowledge
very,
that
very
it's different and
yeah.
it's a big shift, but I think it hits our timeline in a different way. I think it hits the more of like, it's more front facing with what the story is that they're trying to tell. Yes, it's a little less subtle, but I don't know that you need to be as subtle. I don't mind being shown the story that you want to tell. I don't think you need to hide it anymore.
In terms of the idea of the being a TV show, I think it lends itself. The X-Men really lend itself to that because it is a very serialized storytelling. I mean, I've said before that the best adaptation of the Dark Phoenix saga is, of course, from the 90s animated series where they just did a whole week. They told a story. It was fairly comic book accurate.
Just take that exact thing and turn it into a live
Chris
action
Claremont
show.
gets based on stories written by. He gets that credit, which you don't usually see in cartoons. And so when you do, if you were to do a series like that, I mean, after Dark Phoenix, 2 months later, they did Days of Future Past in the comics, you know, so you're not able to do that when you do a movie every 2 or 3 years. Now, Disney's going to really be looking at a bottom line, a financial bottom line of doing X-Men movies versus TV. Yeah. But if they could do this, I think the characters would definitely be better served, and you would get so much more. You know, I mean, think about how. What do we have? We have 39 hours of Daredevil instead of what we would have maybe gotten 2 more movies, you know, if they had made Daredevil movies, you know. So to get that much X-Men, I would certainly be on board for.
Yeah,
I'll watch it.
We talk about X-Men all day, but there's a bunch of other cool stuff going on in the universe, right, in the Marvel universe right now. So if you guys have more thoughts on Dark Phoenix, please let us know in the comments below. Feel free to tweet at us on Twitter at Marvel News PTN for the main show's handle, or at that Zach Wilson, at Xia_Land, at Christian DMZ. Let us know what you thought of Dark Phoenix, because we do want to know. And we are keeping an eye on the chat. I know there's been some questions, and we'll try to get to them at the end.
Zach, this ties into your thing. Sorry. For your African-American casting, so Idris Elba as Magneto and Sterling K. Brown as Professor Xavier from Jenna James.
I think that's what Coy suggested on Instagram.
I just saw it right here, and
I'll watch Idris Elba in
I'll watch
anything.
him play anything. So I just wanted to give Jenna James credit.
Yeah, I think I saw that Coy had that casting at one point. I was I came to a similar conclusion just thinking about how to fix Magneto's timeline and like bring him more towards the future, or the present rather. But yeah, yes, to both of those actors.
Yeah, I'm there.
You could even I could even see Ricky Whittle being involved, who's been yes, he's not that the character he's playing on American Gods is not at all fit with those, but I think he's a strong actor and he has that presence to play probably Magneto, not Xavier, but he like a muscle bound Magneto would be an interesting change.
Very. Yeah.
All right, let's this is real quick. I just want to mention it that you guys know. If you are a fan of Wolverine, the scripted podcast that they've been doing, the new season is now available wide release on Apple Podcasts and basically anywhere you're listening to podcasts. The first episode's up. I listened to it. It's like 30 minutes. It's super fun. He's going to New Orleans to investigate somebody that's missing. I'm gonna let you guys find out more about that on your own. But episode 2 is getting Gambit. And they released like a 30-second clip of him playing cards, and Wolverine stumbles up.
Since we're never getting a Gambit movie, then
you
there
can
you
at
go.
least listen to Gambit. And he sounds really great. All right, let's move on from that because I want time to talk about the Marvel's Avengers video game that just dropped its big trailer at E3. You guys watched it. What did you guys think of it?
Okay, so it's super weird seeing it be the characters without the characters that you're used to like visually seeing. I know in comic books it's different, but we've been watching these movies for 10 years, and now they're like, hey, here's this video game, and it's going to be really close, but different people, and you're like, it's strange.
Yeah.
It's very odd. I'm not silly, but like I hate it. The graphics look great. You told me that it's going to be multiplayer.
So is there
going to be a story-based part?
It's a story. It's a story mode. The whole thing's story.
Okay.
When I say multiplayer, it's going to be co-op.
Gotcha.
So you're going to be able to play with your friends, which makes so much sense for the Avengers. Like whereas Spider-Man is a one-player game, there's no multiplayer.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because that's Spider-Man. He flies solo most of the time. But the Avengers, you want to be able to have like your friend come play Thor, and you're playing Iron Man and stuff like that. And like I think that you could probably. I think they're going to involve like combo moves. Like I'm sure that Iron Man can bounce stuff off Cap Shield kind of things. From what I've read, the gameplay is pretty fun. Like people haven't been able to play it yet, but they've seen gameplay demos at E3, and they were comparing Thor to Kratos in the recent God of War story, where it's like you're throwing things and you're able to beat people up and then zip it back to you. That always felt like Thor anyway.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I would bet that it'll be fun to play, but in sort of the likenesses, obviously you don't want to pay likeness rights to famous actors, but also it just felt like to me when they used to make TV series out of movies, like there was a Ferris Bueller's TV series, and
There was?
yeah,
That's
and
so weird.
Matthew Broderick was not there was this guy Charlie Schlatter, Jennifer Aniston was on it. It's like, no, you don't. It doesn't even look close to right. And, it used to happen a lot more. They don't really do
I
those
watched the pilot for Blazing Saddles, the TV show.
It's a perfect example. So it just felt
Again,
a little
what?
bit. It felt a little bit like that. But look, sometimes you get MASH too, which was on for like 12 years, so it could work. But anyway, I was so distracted by that watching it as a trailer, I'm just like, oh, I don't know. But I bet if I was sitting down to play it, I'm like, oh, this is really fun. I don't care. I think that's kind of the problem that video games has evolved so much that they look, because if you're playing like Capcom versus X-Men, well, it doesn't really look like anything. It just looks like a cartoon, so it's fine. There's such expressive features on these actors that it's like, well, that doesn't look anything like Tony Stark. That doesn't look like any of the Bruce Banners, including Bill Bixby.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I feel like everyone that's like complaining about the looks and everything is forgetting is this is not the MCU. This is a completely different universe.
Exactly.
And where I think people are like having like a little trouble with it is because here's the thing. We also got this reaction when they first showed off the look for Spider-Man, the video game. It was like, what's that white like logo on his chest? But it differentiated it. Like that's in its own universe. And there's actually some rumors that they might that Spider-Man might exist. Like the Sony video game Spider-Man might be in the same universe as this
cool.
Avengers. it's different companies and who knows, like, but there was a reference in like a little audio reference in Spider-Man where they were like, the Avengers are so busy being on the West Coast, and this trailer showed off the Avengers in San Francisco with their new headquarters in San Francisco. Someone's like, oh, have they been planning this all along?
It's gonna be a crossover.
Which would be really cool, even if there's not a crossover, just the idea that they exist in the same universe. Right. And there's a lot of cool details in this trailer. You've got the Taskmaster's going to be appears going to be the big bad. At least he's involved in this big first trailer. We could bring up that photo of Taskmaster. Sorry, I'm going to go a little bit out of order. But I think it's number 4 was Taskmaster. Yeah, there he is. And he looks great. Yeah. You guys know I'm excited to see Taskmaster do some stuff. Even we're not still got MCU Taskmaster. This looks really cool. As far like there's one other thing that they announced and makes me real excited. And it's again another reminder that these are wildly different versions of the characters. If we go to image number 5, which should be the next one down, Hank Pym's in the game, guys. Hey. And this is like so unlike any other Hank Pym. It actually reminds me more of early days Avengers Hank Pym, where he's a little bit more like not swashbuckling, but he's like got a little more attitude to him. He like walks in. There's like a big like. It looks like an insect robot. It's yellow and black. You can see him. He's holding it there. It's enormous. And he walks in like, I got this, you guys. You hear Tony over the headset like, what are you doing, Hank? Get out of there. He holds up a giant, like, looks like a particle cannon on his shoulder and shrinks it down. And it's like, oh, you got it. This is like cool guy Hank Pym, which I'm hoping that they also get Janet Van Dyne in there. Like, if I could play as the Wasp in a video game, I will lose it, you guys. I will lose it. Like, playing as Ant-Man and Giant Man would be cool. But playing as the Wasp, like, get shrinky and then flying around, yes, please.
I mean, that is cool, especially if you can, like, shrink, fly, and then come out and, like, game mechanics. Game mechanics, guys.
It could be really cool. So if we go to number 6, the last one, you can see a little bit of what the perspective is going to be like. This is what it's going to look like when you have Iron Man playing, like when you're playing as Iron Man. So like
it's third
flying,
person.
you can blasting. Yeah, it's all third person. Mm-hmm. But they also showed like the Hulk that you can play as. Hawkeye's not in there, but they've said that there's rumors now that he is going to be eventually. You don't see him here. He may come in later. That's the thing. Like you cycle through all the players in the tutorial that they've shown people, but I think they're going to be able to add other characters as you go in deeper and add different mechanics and all that. That's the one thing that's tough is all these people have different fighters. Like Widow in this is a certain, like, Widow is a normal person. There's only so much you can do realistically with that character. She has gadgets and apparently like she gets into a fight with Taskmaster, and maybe you do a lot of like sneaky spy stuff, like you do like kind of Solid Snake, like, you know, like Heidi, but that kind of stuff,
Solid,
like you just pull from any video game, like to use and make this like all these different facets for all these different characters.
Yeah, which you would have to really, because that's another thing. I wonder how buggy this game is going to be just because of that, because of all of the different interactions that you have and the different characters and so much coding. Jesus, that's going to be interesting. But I do like that idea of making it very multifaceted game so that you get to play each character as a whole different, unique experience, but it like comes together.
Yeah,
I like that.
I think ultimately this is going to be great. Like the costumes, people may not like them, but the motion. Like, I know they did mocap on most of these characters. The actors have talked about it. They have a good voice cast. It's not the original like voices that you know from comics or voices from comics. It's not anybody from the movies. But they got a great cast, like Troy Baker, Travis Willingham, Laura Bailey, a bunch of other people. Nolan North, I think, is playing Tony. If I got my, I think that's right. I can't remember. I'm getting Bruce and Tony backwards. Either way, I'm very excited about this game. Okay, we only have a few minutes left, so let's talk about Jessica Jones. We're not even going to play the bug for TV time. We don't have time. Christian and I have both seen episode 1.
Oh, look, Xia left out again.
Yeah, it's almost like they planned this.
We don't plan this, you guys. It just happens this way.
I was actually called for this too.
Yes. And let me mention that I saw it because I'll be on the AfterBuzz TV panel, the after show for it, which a couple episodes are going to drop overnight tonight. So the show will be available midnight local time, and the first couple episodes of the after show will also be there. But I've only seen episode 1 as we're talking right now. And I thought it was fun. It was, it's like, oh yeah, look, it's everybody. Remember, why you like this show. Here's all the people you like, and you still don't like Trisha's mom, but she's a great character. And it's, the story only moves a little bit, and in true Netflix fashion, you're always like, well, now I want to watch the next one.
Yeah. So. The first episode is a little slow moving, as you get caught up with where everybody is. It's sort of normal for a later season. Like we're in the 3rd season. Yeah. It's been they've had some time off the air. You sort of need to catch up with everybody. Malcolm has a great storyline growing.
I do like that. Yeah.
I'm like, I want to know more.
Yeah.
Jessica's in a different place, which is really cool because we'll get to see her how she behaves differently with different characters now that she's had a little bit more. She's got a little bit more notoriety behind her. It looks cool. It looks good. I'm excited to watch the rest of it tonight as soon as I get off of work, which I get off of work at 11:30. So it works out.
Perfect timing.
I can just go home and go click. And
right on to
episode
sleep. 2.
Yes. Right away. Okay. We have 2 minutes left. I think that's enough time to drop one more rumor that was out there. Oh, wait. Before we move off Jessica Jones. If you guys are listening on a podcast, you're going to get this right in your feed. But as we've been doing our back and forth with Marvel TV Weekly, on Sunday, I'll be joining these two again. They're nice enough to have me come by on Marvel TV Weekly. We're going to talk about the first 3 episodes of Jessica Jones. And if you're a podcast subscriber, we're still doing our test run about both shows showing up in the same feed. And so just keep subscribing here. And you can listen to us talk about Jessica Jones 1 through 3.
And we'll also talk about S.H.I.E.L.D. And anybody who knows Zach knows that he's always happy to have the opportunity to talk about S.H.I.E.L.D.
That smile will tell you anything. If you're listening, just go watch that one part.
And if you want to watch, that'll be on AfterBuzz TV,
Correct.
Our sister network. Mm-hmm. All right, so now we don't have time for rumor, but there is a casting rumor out there that Marvel is trying to cast somebody called the Benefactor.
Who could that be?
And it's a Caucasian male, age 40 to 60. Some people think it's Norman Osborn. I disagree. I think it's gonna be somebody way closer. I think you're looking at a TV kingpin, like a Disney Plus kingpin. Because they said Atlanta, and I think from what I understand, mostly Disney Plus shows are currently planned for Atlanta, barring Disney shifting things around. Okay, guys, we got to wrap it up. Unfortunately, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast, on the show. We'll be back next week. We'll be back on Sunday for Marvel TV Weekly, and on next Thursday to talk more Marvel. And stick around and stay tuned for the announcement when we will be talking to Chris Claremont about Dark Phoenix and Legion. Christian Bladt, where can everyone find you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ, and when we have that interview scheduled, that's one place you'll be able to find out about it.
And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Xia_Land. That's XIA_Land. And this Sunday, AfterBuzz TV, 9 p.m. Sunday.
And I'm Zach Wilson. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at @ZachWilson. We will absolutely be doing more. You can also send your questions to Doom's Question Corner. We ran out of time because we had a lot of stuff to talk about, including a movie review today, guys. But I've been building up. I have a whole list of questions for a slow news week, and we're going to get to a ton of them at some point. So keep sending them in Doom's Question Corner. You can find me at @ZachWilson. Be sure to listen to my other podcast, Ships in the Night, where we talk about weird cross-fandom shipping. We had AfterBuzz TV's own Roxy Stryer, also one of the hosts of DC Movie News, and guess what we did, guys? We did a Marvel DC crossover.
I like it.
Deadpool and Harley Quinn. How does it go? It's real violent, but how does it end? That's Ships in the Night, available wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you guys so much for listening. This has been Marvel Movie News. Excelsior to you.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network, we would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network.